Good morning, all. Welcome to our webinar series, part 2, Securing a Hybrid Workplace with Azure Virtual Desktop. My name is Rick Setti. I'm one of the BDMs in PS Melbourne Hub, and I'll be your host for the event today. Before we kick things off, I'd like to take this opportunity to make an acknowledgement of country. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to the elders past and present. I further extend the respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people online with us today, participating in our event. Now, we're running this Azure series, which started late last year. The initial part of the series was to focus on how to help organizations migrate to Azure Cloud, and was focusing on the cost elements and the security aspect. This is part of our ongoing effort in educating organizations that haven't discovered the power of Microsoft Azure as yet. Some of you may already joined this session, but in case you didn't, that part is also available on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to watch it there. Now, in this part of the series, we're focusing on organizations who have already adopted Azure and are looking for ways to better harness its capabilities. Now, there were a few options we had when we were selecting the content, such as the backup, DR, app modernization, but we try to focus on the hybrid workplace. It seems quite topical. We're seeing lots and lots of organizations requiring the need of a remote connectivity in the last 2 years. It's been quite interesting. We moved from office work to remote work, and now we're going towards hybrid work. So the content that we're planning to cover today is about supporting your hybrid workplace. And in the recent time, there's been some market conditions that are driving towards that solution as well. Like we're seeing the delayed turnaround time for hardware due to the shortage of chips, and we're seeing that organizations are required to get more out of the existing hardware. So which is where the remote desktop solution, such as Azure Virtual Desktop, will help. A quick summary of the agenda today. We'll be talking about the different options that are available, Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365 from Microsoft, and how it compares to the legacy applications. We'll be talking about the different hybrid workplace scenarios, remote connectivity, and if you're thinking, if you're not too sure if these options are required by your business, we'll be talking about a few use cases as well to help you understand better. And then we have vendor Microsoft on the panel as well today, and they'll be touching on the market trends, where they're seeing the market heading. And we'll summarize with some security considerations to help you embark on the journey. Now, before I introduce our speakers for today, a quick poll, just to get a bit of understanding of the type of audience we have on the call today. If you can select the option which is most suitable to you. We have remote desktop services, Citrix, Windows 365, Azure, AWS, Azure Virtual Desktop. So whatever option is most relevant to you, it help our speakers for today understand so they can tailor the content maybe based on your current usage. So we'll give it probably 10 seconds till we have all the responses there. Okay, let's see. Now, looking at the responses, it looks like majority of our audience today is still using RDS, so which is quite interesting. So, and there are some using Citrix, and there's a small percentage which is not using any of these solutions at this stage. Okay, well that's good. So I'll introduce our speakers for today. So I have a power duo with us on the call. So I have my colleague Kaywan Mahmoodi from Professional Advantage. He's one of our senior solution architects, and I've actually worked closely with him for almost 7-8 years now. He's been in the industry for almost 15 years. He's quite passionate about technology. He's helped a number of our clients build a robust cloud migration strategy. And there's a lot of solutions he's delivered recently around the remote connectivity solutions. While we wait for Kaywan, then I'll also introduce our second speaker for today, Henry. Henry is from Microsoft. So Henry Yang is a senior cloud solution architect, and he's been in the industry for almost 15 years now. And Henry's expertise is in endpoint computing, in endpoint security, and he's going to be talking about where Microsoft sees the industry heading and where they're seeing their clients' demands changing. So he works closely with not only the end users, but also a lot of partners. So his contribution today is going to be quite valuable. So we'll kick things off with Kayvan.
Thank you, Rick, and hello to everyone on the call.
That's great. So if you can start off with just giving a bit of a comparison on what are the different technologies available there, and give us a bit of overview of the different options available for our audience today.
Okay, sure. So basically, Rick, the main question that we get these days from clients, and we get that a lot, is what are the differences between different solutions that Microsoft provides, like RDS, Azure Virtual Desktop, or Windows 365 platform. Or sometimes they ask about their licensing requirements or suitability for different customers, and etc. So I believe it's really an important topic to talk about and clarify the subject for all the audiences and everyone who's after this information. Obviously, there are sources of information online on Microsoft pages or online forums about the products like AVD or Windows 365. They often highlight the key benefits and features for each solution, like being scalable or reduced total cost of ownership or enhanced security, and many more. But those often apply to all these platforms, not just to one. So it still remains a question for everyone. What are the actual differences between them? Well, to better explain the differences, I have to go a little bit into the technical layer first and discuss the various components of a kind of a general remote access environment first. We can then highlight what the differences are for each of these products from there. So basically, when we're talking about a remote access solution, we can technically break it down into two main layers of control and session layer. Control layer is where the main controls are happening for the remote access. So when a remote user initiates a connection, they first hit this layer. Things like encryption, authentication, MFA, load balancing, they are all part of this layer. So once the user connection is confirmed, then it will pass to the session layer just so user can get the remote desktop session they wanted. Or if it is a VDI solution, they will get their dedicated VM access. Now let's map it out to real-world scenario and see what actual components are involved for each solution, because that's where the main differences are residing. Let me start with RDS first, given that is a well-known solution in the market for many years now, and it's kind of a proven solution for many organizations. So in a typical RDS environment, we will have multiple servers sitting in each of these layers. Main ones, as you can see on the top, are gateway for secure connectivity and encryption, and connection broker for load balancing between the session servers. And there are also additional servers like Radius if there is an MFA authentication involved, or web access if remote access via browser is enabled for the environment. The session layer, on the other hand, is more simple. Usually it has a few identical servers depending on the number of users accessing the environment. The more users you have, more servers you will have on this layer. The user session will be distributed, the sessions of the users will be distributed among all these servers on the session layer. That's for the performance, for the optimal performance achievement. So this model of the RDS is preferred by many organizations because first, it is flexible. You can have this model in your on-prem environment or in cloud or even in hybrid, whatever you like, you can deploy this system. Also, because users have full control over all these servers in different layers, then they can add any type of customization they want as well. That's one of the reasons that it is very famous as well. But as you can see, there are quite a few number of different servers involved in the RDS environment, especially in the control layer. Already we can see 5 servers in this slide, but it's not limited to those really. Usually clients with critical business workload, they need to consider high availability and redundancy as well. So they end up deploying more than one server for each of those roles you can see on top in the control layer. For our clients, we usually see anywhere between 2 to 10 servers sitting in the control layer alone, depending on their environment. So with the recent demands toward cloud hosting and automation, Microsoft has made the initiative and introduced Azure Virtual Desktop, which basically what they have done is they have bundled all those required roles and servers needed in the control layer, packaged them into a cloud service offering called AVD, offering not just the same, but much improved functionalities as well. So imagine all those number of servers that were needed in that layer are no longer needed at all, and they are replaced by cloud service. All the cost of running those servers, compute resource, maintenance, antivirus, backup, patching, everything can go away completely and replaced with a cloud offering. Kind of a free cloud offering, let's call it. I mentioned free because there is no actual cost associated with the control layer of the AVD. Cost is only for the servers running in the session layer, which you had to have it in the RDS as well. So already we can see a huge benefit of here not needing all those servers in the control layer alone. The session layer, on the other hand, remains somewhat the same from a design perspective. I mean, literally, if you already have an RDS environment in Azure, you can just replace the control layer servers with the free AVD offering and leave the session servers the same, just update them to talk to AVD instead. But that's not just this. What Microsoft has done is they provided significant improvement in that layer as well. For example, one major improvement there is in the session layer is ability to host Windows 10 or 11 as the session host server. So in the past with the RDS, we were only limited to have Windows Server OS running on the session servers. So when a user was connecting to the remote environment, the desktop they were getting was a Windows Server desktop. But now they can have Windows 10 or 11 as well. This is very handy to give them the same look and feeling of Windows 10 desktop because they are often more familiar with that as they probably have it on their own home PC or work PC. Also, if an organization already has entitlement to use Windows 10 or 11 as part of their M365 licensing package, they can utilize that and save on AVD licensing costs as well. So another useful feature worth mentioning here is the auto scaling that can be done in session layer. This automatically extends or reduces the number of running servers in the session layer. Usually, clients have a lot more users accessing the server during working hours compared to after hours or night time. So instead of running all those session servers 24/7, the auto-scaling feature can expand them as needed. Bear in mind, those session servers are often powerful machines because they are dealing with many users simultaneously. So they have a high compute cost associated with them. So any saving or any time reduction by auto-scaling here is going to be a considerable cost reduction. Although the scaling feature is technically achievable in RDS environment as well, but that requires many manual scripting and integrations to work, whereas in AVD, they are there out of the box and managed very easily by Azure portal. So in summary, AVD will provide the same and more improved functionalities as RDS. It will run from customers' Azure environment, so we don't have the element of on-prem anymore for AVD. And as you can see, users need to maintain having the session layer servers in Azure themselves. So they have to maintain all those servers themselves. So it's very useful if environments already have a cloud footprint or if they already using Azure for other purposes to come and start using AVD as well. But then some organizations don't have any cloud infrastructure at all. Usually, small businesses just have a few users requiring Office 365 package for day-to-day business needs and not much of a fancy cloud infrastructure at all. So to ensure they also can benefit from a proper remote access solution, Microsoft has introduced the next product, which is Windows 365. What Microsoft has done here is basically they bundled both control layer and session layer into one single cloud offering. Essentially, you sign up for the service, and there you go, you have your cloud PC solution, no infrastructure needed, or any like a cloud or Azure environment or complex deployment needed at all. Just a cloud service providing the cloud PC remote access for your end-to-end. Main difference here is RDS and AVD were running from customers' own infrastructure, whether on-prem or in Azure, whereas Windows 365 runs from Microsoft managed infrastructure. So customers don't really have VM level access or visibility to the servers. Actual servers are in the background in Microsoft network connected to the internet, not visible to the end user. So many come and say, well, we need Windows 365 Cloud PC because of its simplicity, but we also need those PCs to communicate with our servers or application that we have on-prem or in Azure. Can we still use that? So the answer here is yes. Depending on the type of Windows 365 subscription you get, whether it's business, enterprise, or there are different types, you can have the option of connecting that into your existing Azure environment if you have one. That is done via presenting your Azure VNet into Windows 365. But again, this is just optional added feature for mostly larger and enterprises if they choose to use Windows 365. Mostly clients inquiring about Windows 365 are those with no cloud footprint and those who are after a simple end-to-end solution without the complexities. So I've summarized what we just discussed here all in one place, in case that helps. Basically, RDS would be better choice if you want to have full control over all aspects and parameters of your hosting environment, or if you want flexibility of hosting the environment on-prem, in cloud, or in hybrid. Or if you have Windows Server OS access requirements, or some may have application or integration requirements that demands them to have RDS in specific. AVD, on the other hand, would be useful if you want more simple environment with less components to manage, but yet flexible to an extent. Or if you need Windows 10 or 11 desktop experience for your users, or if auto-scaling feature that we discussed is something that you need. Or if you prefer a fully cloud-hosted solution as opposed to on-prem. And finally, Windows 365 should be your option if you are after a simple cloud solution with no complexities, and if you want quick deployment without time and cost spent on configuration side. Or if you no longer want to spend time on ongoing server maintenance at all, because here in Windows 365, everything managed by Microsoft. Or also Windows 10 or 11 is another option here if you want to use that. Bear in mind, these are all high-level points. Each customer's requirements are different, and many other factors needed to be factored in when talking about the right solution. I just tried to highlight some key differences here that are offered a question, and I hope that was helpful.
That's a great comparison there, Keyvan. So Azure Virtual Desktop sits right in the middle between Windows 365 and remote desktop services. So Windows 365 means being the most simple but less flexibility, whereas remote desktop services give you most, is a bit complex to set up, but gives you more flexibility as well. And AVD sits in the middle, so that's great. So out of these three, or comparing these three, how do they all fit into the hybrid environment? Can you talk us through that as well, please?
Sure. So hybrid. So in the past, all organizations were utilizing on-prem environment for their IT needs. Now that the cloud environment has evolved, many have a fully cloud environment, or as you mentioned, they may have a hybrid model where a portion of their environment is in cloud and the other portion is hosted on-prem. Short answer to your question is all three solutions that we discussed support hybrid model, but in different way. For example, RDS is the most flexible one. It can be deployed on-prem, in cloud, or even in hybrid mode. Like you can literally deploy the RDS in hybrid mode as well. So basically that can address any type of needs you may have in terms of hybrid or non-hybrid scenarios. You just choose where and how you want to deploy it, and it will serve the purpose. AVD and Windows 365, on the other hand, are cloud service by nature, and they need to be deployed and hosted in cloud. But they both have the capability to connect to customers' cloud or even on-prem environment via the Azure network. AVD by default is in Azure, so it has the feature built in. If your on-prem environment is connected to your Azure, when you have AVD deployed, then it can talk to your on-prem as well. And Windows 365 has a specific plans which supports Azure presence and hybrid environment. So depending on what model of Windows 365 you choose or you opt in, then you can use the benefit of the hybrid as well.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for K1. And one last piece from you, and then we can move on to Henry from Microsoft. So can you please talk us about the specific use cases for Azure Virtual Desktop?
Oh, well, use cases, yes. Well, the use cases are really broad and is different for any customer. Some choose AVD to achieve a standard environment for their users, just to have a unified environment across the board for all users for simplicity. Some others need a powerful desktop environment for their users, and instead of heavily investing on buying high-end laptops or PCs for their users, they instead deploy a scalable AVD environment with powerful, session servers at the back, and users can connect with any type of low-end devices to that environment and yet experience, utilizing a high-end back-end desktops as well. We have some clients even using low-cost Chromebook devices to connect to their hosting environment to achieve the same. Or even some may need AVD as a DR solution for their environment. Say they have desktop and everything on-prem, but then they choose AVD to be their plan B in case their office is not accessible for any reason. So the users can access company's AVD environment remotely from their home PC to do that, same day-to-day work that they used to. We have seen a lot of this specific example of the use case during the COVID pandemic, and it was very helpful for many organizations to do that.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, K1. We'll probably give you a little bit of break now and go shift some gears and move to the real technicians from Microsoft. So welcome to the webinar, Henry.
Thanks, Rick.
Awesome. So just continuing from our discussion with K1, can you please about what is Microsoft seeing happening in the market right now? What sort of changes have you seen in the last 2 years, and where do you think the endpoint computing is heading?
Sure, thanks, Rick. Yeah, a significant trend I think we are all seeing today after the pandemic is people want more flexibility and feel really supported at their work. No matter they will go back to the office or stay at home or work in the front line. So those demanding really raise a lot of challenges for organizations, how to provide the necessary endpoint tools or solutions to cater for those needs, while ensure the security and compliance at all times. So it's all these demandings, that's why we put lots of investment into the virtualization technologies, such like Azure Virtual Desktop, to help organization and end users to address those specific endpoint operating needs. Since such like keep your data and organization resources safe, while enabling the appropriate access by a variety of users across office workers, frontline workers, and temporary contractors, etc. Especially like the people working temporarily as a contractors, you may not, to get the physical device shipped to their home, and they just work for you for 3-6 months. Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 65 really play a great role in those scenarios. And with Azure Virtual Desktop, we also provide the out-of-box documentation system support compliance with industry and local regulations, especially cater for those customers in financial services, healthcare, and government who are across lots of personal data. So then we also further to help you to access the IT services on demand for increasing elastic workforce. Scenarios such like mergers, acquisitions, short-term employees, like I mentioned before, those contractors and external partners. So Azure Virtual Desktop also help the employee to meet their specific need. If they need to use that, bring your own device scenario, or mobile staff, or people working in the call center, branch workers. We also supporting those specialized workloads, such like in the designing, engineering. People need to use the legacy applications, software development and testing, etc. So there are really lots of scenarios Azure Virtual Desktop can come to play, like Kivan mentioned as well in his previous session. Hope that answered your question, Rick.
That's great. Thank you, Henry. And just to follow up from the content that came on talked about before, is there anything you'd like to add where AVD compares to Windows 365?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really hot topic, hot questions from many customers as well, since we launched Windows 365. For users, there's really a few differences if we compare these two options. We provide those capabilities and the different options for users to choose. Like Kivan briefly mentioned in his session, really we can apply those two solutions into different scenarios. But to go a little bit further, if we compare the technical features, the Azure Virtual Desktop really designed to be a very flexible solutions. So as a customer, you have the control and you can do lots of customizations for Azure Virtual Desktop, customize the memory, CPU, disk, how much Azure resource you want to use. While in Windows 365, we provide such a software as a service, a licensing SKU, so you exactly know how much you're gonna pay for this per user license per month licensing SKU. So this is really give you, if you are IT planning to deploy the solution with Windows 365, you already know that what's the cost is going to happen. While in Azure Virtual Desktop, it really depends on how much you want to use for the Azure services. There are really a lot of other the things you want to take into consideration, such like application streaming. If you are using your remote application streaming, you need to go with Azure Virtual Desktop as the option. And if you have the requirement for some specialized GPU performance requirement, Azure Virtual Desktop is the goal. And while the Windows 65 is more easy for the end users to access a cloud PC, especially resonated to the contractor scenario. You don't need to ship a physical PC to them. They just use their own, bring your own device, log into a portal, access to the PC in the cloud. So this is really easy for the users to use. And also, like Kivan mentioned before, we support those hybrid approach. You can use Windows 65 and Azure Virtual Desktop in the same organization without any problems. So we definitely, you can have that flexibility there as well. We also publish a document here about comparing the Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 65. It helps the customers to make the decision, and also you can definitely have these two solutions in this at the same time. So not the issue at all. So last one, I also want to reinforce for the Azure Virtual Desktop for today is for users, Azure Virtual Desktop provides the full Windows 10, Windows 11 enterprise experience, including the Edge, Cortana, Store, all the applications the users are already familiar with. We also provide the best-in-class Office 365 Pro Plus user experience, especially during the multi-session virtualization environment. You really want the user to have a good experience when they are using those Office applications. And we also offer those GPU acceleration for encoding and videos, so to provide those improved responsiveness and to smooth the video playback during the virtualization environment. For IT admins and teams, this multi-session Windows 10, Windows 11 availability in Azure Virtual Desktop also add the efficiency and easy to manage for devices and everyday applications. You really reduce lots of IT cost by supporting up to many multiple devices per user per day comparing to Windows 10 Enterprise single session. So it's really a simplified management in Azure with a single image for both single session and multi-session users. Hope that answered the question, Rick.
It does, Henry. Quite detailed. Thank you for that. Now, that leads to an obvious question, which I think the audience has put as well in the list. What are the licensing requirements for AVD? Licensing with Microsoft can often be confusing and challenging. So if you can cover that, that'd be fantastic.
Sure, happy to briefly go through that as well. So many Microsoft customers are actually already eligible to use Windows Azure Virtual Desktop, especially customers already using Microsoft 365. So I did prepare a slide here. So if you are using any of the licensing skills here, you are already entitled for Azure Virtual Desktop. There are definitely some prerequisites you need to meet. Your infrastructure need to have the following things to support Azure Virtual Desktop, such like Azure Active Directory, Windows Server, Active Directory to sync with your Azure Active Directory. It's like your local AD to the AD in the cloud, so our Azure AD. You can configure this using the Azure AD Connect for hybrid organizations, or use the Azure AD Domain Service for hybrid or cloud organizations. A Windows Server AD on-prem synchronized with Azure AD. So user is sourced from the Windows Server AD, and Azure AVD VM is joined the Windows your on-prem AD domain. So there's some prerequisite here, but from the licensing perspective, it's really easy and simple. If you're already using those licenses, again, you're already entitled with AVD. It's just when you enable the AVD, it's charged by you how much you want to consume. Our consumption, it's really a consumption model. So yeah, hope that answer your question. And if you have some remaining specific detail you want to know, just feel free to put into the webinar chat window. We're happy to answer that for you as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Henry. That's actually quite interesting, because that means a lot of customers who've made the shift to Microsoft 365 are already entitled to Azure Virtual Desktop. And this is a matter of buying resources in Azure, which is quite good, actually. It makes the transition easier rather than going through a complex structure of buying licenses, right? So that's quite good. Exactly. Thanks for that. That information quite useful, Henry. We'll come back to you with some questions from the audience in a bit. In the meantime, I want to talk about a client scenario that Professional Advantage was recently part of. So, just to give you some examples of the projects that we've delivered. We're involved in migrating a client of ours, Wine Australia, which is an industry advocacy association for all wine growers and producers and that export from Australia. Quite a reputable organization. So they were actually challenged with this legacy application, was sitting in null infrastructure, security concerns, performance concerns, and they were moved to Azure. So Professional Advantage worked closely with them to move them across, and they actually moved to Azure Virtual Desktop, not because of the hybrid workspace scenario, but more around the keeping the application on, because it wouldn't work on the legacy infrastructure, and so that could be one of the requirements as well. So if you have applications which you have compatibility issues with the hardware, Azure Virtual Desktop can be a response to that sort of business challenge as well. So all the attendees of the webinar today, they have an opportunity to catch up with one of our solution architects, someone like K1, and have a complimentary workshop where we discuss your particular scenarios. The contact details are on the screen there, and feel free to reach out and book a session and see if any of the solutions that were discussed today can be of benefit to your business. Just before we start the Q&A session, there's a few questions waiting up from the audience. This is a series, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, that we're running. So there's a part 3 which will be released, which is scheduled for 7th of April. So if you haven't registered so far, please go to our LinkedIn page, go to our website, and register your interest. And that will be talking about Azure Analytics Service in that webinar. Now, before we wrap up, I will open the floor. We've had a few questions, so let's see what we received today. There's one from audience regarding Teams. So are there any limitations using Teams in Azure Virtual Desktop? So let's see if you can take that.
I can take that question, Rick.
Thanks, Henry.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. With the pandemic, we really got lots of customers start using Teams, adopt the Teams, help the organizations to start the collaboration. So organizations using Microsoft 365 using Teams is definitely they really want to know what's the requirement or any limitations when using Teams in Azure Virtual Desktop. So in short, Teams on Azure Virtual Desktop, we definitely support chat collaboration. And we recommend if you have the requirement to using Teams for the audios, videos, we would recommend our customers to turn on the media optimization. So if you are using the media optimization in Azure Virtual Desktop, we will support the calling meetings functionalities. We also have a specific document that I can share with you in the chat in the webinar, so you can have a look at all the details there. We definitely recommend you to get some prerequisite work to do some network evaluation for your own environment, and also to install the remote desktop client to meet those Teams hardware requirements. So I will put the link for your reference in the webinar shortly. So that will help you to address those questions.
That's great. Thanks for that, Henry. And Teams is quite interesting because I recall hosting a webinar at the start of 2020 when the pandemic had just hit. And at that time, there were some statistics which said like the usage had jumped from 20 million to 44 million users for Teams. And it was quite a big, huge change there. And then in the recent, session with Microsoft, they said that the consumption has now gone up to 270 million users for Teams, which is huge. So tenfold in like almost 2 years. So some of the change we see in the pandemic is like it's going to be permanent. Teams is like the epicenter for a lot of people in the workspace at this stage. So thank you for clarifying that. So let's jump on to the next question. The security aspect of AVD and Windows 365.
Yeah, I can cover that, Rick, if you want.
Thank you, Kaywan.
Yeah, so security is really a key factor for any platform these days. In a user desktop environment, regardless if it's a physical desktop or a remote access like RDS AVD, it is now important to have like an endpoint detection and response solution in place, like it's also called EDR system. So you have to have it. Microsoft already introduced one of the best EDR solutions in the market with the release of their product called Defender for Endpoint, that natively integrates not only with endpoints, but with users' identity, email, and application as well. Like the EDR system of Microsoft, it detects and prevents also automatic response to all sophisticated attacks. The good news here is Defender for Endpoint is fully compatible with all the three solutions that we have discussed earlier today, meaning RDS, AVD, and Win365, and requires minimum effort for deployment, given the EDR solution is Microsoft-based as natively built in actually into AVD and Windows 365. It's just the RDS that you have to manually do the installation for it. But yes, the solution is there. And no matter which one you choose, either of these three, then you have the proper EDR solution. You can have that with that.
Okay, that's great. So the organizations who already got the Microsoft security architecture in place that will automatically inherit, can be easily inherited to any of these solutions. That's my main message.
Yes, many may already have the licensing requirements for these products, like the Defender that I touched. So if they have it, there is nothing really more than that they have to get. They just install the application and the configuration in the hosting platform, and they utilize the existing licensing, and there you go. You have all the functionalities there.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Kaywan. Another question we got from the audience. Can the RDSH still be located on-prem when using AVD?
Okay, that's a really good question and very technical as well. So basically, RDSH is like it's referred to the session host server sitting under that session layer that we touched earlier. So the answer to that is yes and no. So I start with the no part. So by nature, AVD is an Azure service. So you have to have all the components of it in Azure. Like you can have the control layer, as I mentioned, which is a service from Microsoft, and all of your session host servers sitting in Azure as well. So you can't really have something on-prem. But there is another product from Microsoft, which is called Azure Stack, which is kind of extends your cloud visibility and presence into your, extends it into your on-prem, which basically, I don't want really to go to the details of the Azure Stack, but the short answer is, if you have Azure Stack, then yes, you can have your session host servers running from on-prem via Azure Stack while the entire thing is running from Azure.
Okay, thank you, K1. I've got one more question. How do you access an on-prem application from Cloud VDI?
Okay, so that's what we actually discussed earlier. So let's say if you have either of these solutions, like RDS, AVD, or Windows 365, and let's say they are, for example, let's talk about AVD first. And let's say you have AVD that is running in cloud for you in Azure, and then users, when they connect, they are getting a session from a server in Azure. And if they want to access an application which is on-prem, as long as the Azure environment that you have has some sort of connectivity to your on-prem, let's say if it has a VPN to your on-prem, or it has an express route connection to your on-prem, then all those sessions that users are getting on AVD, they have the ability to access your on-prem application as well. And same for the Windows 365 as well. So there are some of the SKUs of the Windows 365 that allows you to present your Azure Virtual Network on the Windows 365. And again, if your Azure network has the connectivity to your on-prem, then you can access that from Windows 365 as well. RDS, on the other hand, is like we know that it supports either way. So if you want to access on-prem, just deploy it on-prem. Or if you are deploying it in the cloud like Azure, then connect that Azure environment to your on-prem, and you have the connectivity there.
Okay, thank you for that, K1. I think we're pretty much out of time now. So thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget to fill the survey at the end of the call, and we look forward to seeing you in our future webinars. Thank you.